It's been a great week, and again, so many wonderful volunteers that made this week happen. And to everybody who helped make it happen, you are gems. You are amazing, and I'm so glad that everybody can be here today. We'll go out and have a nice, fun time for our picnic. As we get started, I want to tell you a story. So when I was growing up, I'm named after my father. So my name is David Lantow Jr. And so, inevitably, when someone is named Junior, or when someone is the Junior, what do they call them? They call them Junior, right? So I was known, they had two names for me. One was Junior, and the other was Little David. And as you get older, I think when I started getting to about third grade, Junior and Little David didn't work for me anymore. Did not work. And so I can remember even younger than third grade when people would call me Little David, and I would be like, I'm not little, and that kind of a thing. And so I still have family that call me Junior. My mom called me Little David till the day she died, and so it's kind of a reality of being a family. That's how it works. The names stick with you for a long time. But I was the youngest of three children. I have two older sisters, one sister that is 11 years older than me, and one sister that is a year older than me. And then there's me. And I was raised by my mom. My elder sister took care of me a lot of times, myself and my next sister. While mom was at work and things like that, and then grandma would step in, and then she eventually moved in with us. So I grew up raised by a bunch of ladies, all right? There was aunties that came in, older cousins that came in, my older sister, and I grew up around a lot of lady power in the household. And this I remember very distinctly, that Little David thing, it played out in a lot of ways. Because sometimes there would be like an adult conversation that's taking place, and it's like, Little David, we need you to go into the other room. And sometimes it's when things need to be done, it's like, oh, Little David, get out of the way. And then this just played out over and over. And I remember being underestimated for responsibility. Oh, Little David can't do that. Let's get someone else to do that. And as I grew up, I would say this. I carried some pain of always being Little David and being left out and being underestimated and being like, oh, you overlooked. And I learned to take that pain and pour it into taking responsibility and earning trust. And so I like to think of myself like, hey, I've got two older sisters. I love them both. They're great. And they're beautiful and they're wonderful, but man, it's like whatever I'm doing, it's like I might as well be the oldest one, like that kind of thing. That's how I act. I act like, well, I'm the firstborn. I'm not the lastborn. I'm the firstborn, and that's how I take it on. And so I want to say this to you that growing up is not easy for your children. Your children are going to grow up with their own stories of things that held them back, things that were harsh on them, and things they have to work through. Most people wake up or have daddy issues and have mommy issues that they have to work through in their adulthood. And so we're all kind of damaged materials, damaged goods, but that's just par for the course. That's how life is. But your children are going to grow up with pain. Your grandchildren are going to grow up with pain, and there are many forces at work in this world that can work against your grandchildren, work against your children. And I want to talk for a little while about bringing out the best in your children. Bringing out the best in your children. So this talk is called Bringing Out the Best in Your Children. If you want to take notes in your bulletin, there's a sermon notes page on there that you can jot down any little nuggets that come out of this for you, something you want to remember. And I put this together thinking specifically about the next generation, because the next generation, the generation that's rising up, they will come to power one day, and you want them to come to power with being their best. And we as adults, whatever role we play in their lives, Some of you you don't even have children yet. And some of you don't have children and you're not going to have children. And that's okay. But every one of us can play a role in bringing out the best in the next generation. And that's what I want to talk about in these words. Some of you, if you're part of a church community, a faith community like Victory, then we have a lot of volunteers that invest into the children of our church community. And those volunteers, you can pour these elements into the children that you get to serve through volunteerism. And that's an important thing. And so I want to talk for a little bit about the problem of that our children will encounter as they grow up. And think about this. One way or some ways that it's not easy, the path for our children that they will take once they leave home. There are so many question marks. Every child, the littlest kid, all the kids are so cute. We love snapping pictures of them. We love looking at the beautiful pictures of them when they're so small, especially when they're small. And then they get older and they get less cute. And we take less pictures of them. And we don't coddle them as much, and we don't pay as much attention to them as they get older. And it's not that we don't love them anymore. It's just that kind of naturally they're the cutest when they're little, and they're cutest when they're so tiny. And we love especially holding on, goo, 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 and we love doing this, and like every little thing, that the baby does, we were like, it smiled, and you're like, maybe they just have gas, and but that's reality. Every little thing, we're watching them grow up. But as they grow up, they become less cute. And as they grow up, they become, we tolerate their silly behavior less as they get older and older. And imagine your teenager, and you're like, when your teenager smiles, and you're like, she smiled at me. No, not going to happen. You're lucky if you get a smile at her when she's a teenager. Well, so as your children grow up and they prepare to leave home, think about what's in front of them. They have to choose, well, am I going to go to college? Or am I going to get stuck in the college debt trap? Your kids, when they go to college, many kids are going to be saddled with debt for the first 10 or 15 years of their adult life trying to pay off college debt. That's insane. It's like you talk about setting somebody up to fail. The first thing you do as you enter the adult world is you have $100,000, $200,000, $350,000 in college and grad school debt. That's amazing. That's something that is like, why are we doing that to our children? Why are we playing into this system that does this? Debt does not work in anyone's favor except for the debtor, not the dettee. And so we've got debt, we've got how to make investments for their future, we've got how to save. They're going to have to buy a house. Will your kids even be able to buy a house when they're ready to buy a house? Who to marry, how to choose a spouse. Imagine your little children who are so cute when they get to that point, having to make all these choices. Well, guess who has to prepare them to do all that? It's us. It's their parents and their grandparents and their older brothers and sisters. And it's people who love them and care for them, the extended community, the uncles, the aunts, the cousins. And some of the confusing things that our children face, these things that we've just mentioned are kind of, you talk about a hopeless situation. It seems hopeless for a lot of this stuff. And think about what our children are being taught, how our children. It's amazing that in the schools, in public schools, where they're supposed to learn how to think, where they're supposed to learn basic math skills and science, our kids are actually being told to throw science out the window when it comes to their gender. It's really happening. If your kids are in public school, they're being taught to throw science and biology out the window in relation to their gender. They're going to grow up with that. So, unless some of you go, well, I have to put my kids in public school because I can't afford a private school. And I go, I get that. How are you going to teach them truth instead of throwing logic out the window? And that's something that we need to do as parents and as the adults who love our children. Children are being taught to put their feelings above facts. When you talk about feelings and you talk about facts, children are being taught that feelings are more valuable than facts. When in reality, facts are the most important thing. You have to teach your children how not to be ruled by their feelings. You have to teach your children how to rise above their feelings. I know you got your feelings hurt, but you still have to go on. You still have to get along with these people, with this friend. You still have to go to school. You can't just always get your way. And we would do well to teach our children that they can't always get their way. Well, as we think about raising children through adulthood and the hard work of it, both for them and for us, I want to propose a solution. I want to propose something that's an important part of making or bringing out the best in your children. What if I told you that there's a book that has the parenting answers you need? What if I told you that there's a book that will help you bring out the best in your kids? Would you think of that book as a valuable book? Would you go out and get that book? It happens to be the best-selling book of all time, and it's called the Bible. It's called the Bible. And the Bible is a sacred book with so much wisdom, with any topic that you can envision that you'll run into in your parenting. You can find a story that captures or gives you some wisdom on how to parent your child through that situation. Any situation, you'll find a story in the Bible that'll be a resource to you. And I want to for a few minutes kind of talk about how the Bible is this book and how these stories that you can read to your children, stories that you can read to your children, to your grandchildren, to the children you love. You read those stories to them and teach them these stories, unpackage these stories. It will be of a great value to your children. Into the children in your life. And I'll give you an example. The example of the two kings. The two kings are David and Saul. All right? There were two kings in the Bible that were both rulers over Israel. And Saul was the first king of Israel. Saul was chosen to be king for some very specific reasons. And they were that he was handsome and he stood head and shoulders above the rest of the people. Saul was chosen for his looks. He looked good. He was tall and handsome. I used to be tall and handsome. I remember those days. You know, Saul was chosen to be the king based on his external appearance. And we can look at the stories of how that worked out. Do you know that, I'll give you an example, when Saul met the other king that we're going to talk about, whose name is David, and he's the same David that you know of, from the Bible with David and Goliath. And the Bible talks about this great warrior that the Philistines had, and his name was Goliath. And he was a giant. They called him a giant because he was very tall. He was 9 feet tall. He was a great warrior, and he knew how to win battles. Mano a mano, man on man, he could win the battle against anyone. And other men were afraid. Other soldiers were afraid. Back then, it was just men who were soldiers, not women. And all of the soldiers were afraid to battle against Goliath. And when David came across Goliath and how he defied Israel and defied the living God, he's like, your God's not even powerful enough to help you defeat me. And David, young David, who was a skinny shepherd of his family's sheep. He was tasked, his older brothers were soldiers in the army, but he wasn't old enough to be in the army, and he stayed at home, and he took care of the family's sheep. He showed up on a battlefield one day, and he saw Goliath across the valley, and he's defying the people to come fight him. The Israelite army to come fight him. And David goes, who's this guy? Who's going to go fight him? How come you guys aren't going out there to fight him? And everybody's like, David, you need to go back to the sheep, all right? You're making us look bad. And And David, he had this belief, this strength, this courage that he could fight this Goliath. He's like, you know what? When a lion came and tried to take my sheep, I killed the lion. You know, when a bear came and tried to kill my sheep, I killed the bear. This guy's going to be like the lion and the bear. And everybody's like, yeah, right. But they send him out. And David was armed with three things. He's armed with his courage, he's armed with his faith, and he's armed with a sling that he was really good with a sling. Not a slingshot like this, a sling that was a weapon. And so when he met Saul, Saul met him, David defeated Goliath, and Saul, after seeing David became a national hero for beating the giant, Saul became jealous of David. That's the Saul, the guy who was chosen for his looks. And so he saw it like, well, I look bad because he looks good. If he looks good, he's in my kingdom. He's under me. He can't look better than me. And Saul became jealous. And Saul became so jealous that he made it his life purpose to kill David. And he tried on many occasions. David outwitted him. And that's the Saul, the guy who was chosen for his looks. That's the kind of character of that man. But David, he was chosen, you know, when they were choosing a new king, the Lord spoke to Samuel the prophet. He said, Samuel, go to the house of Jesse, and you're going to anoint one of his young sons as king. And he said to Jesse, bring out all your sons, because one of them is going to be anointed the next king of Israel. And because Saul has displeased the Lord. And so Jesse brings out his sons, and they all come before Samuel. And Samuel's kind of like, okay, Lord, I need you to speak to me. Which of these boys is going to be it? They were all men. Which one of these guys is going to be the next king? And all of them come, and Samuel goes, none of these guys is the king. And he goes, is this all the sons you have? And he goes, Jesse, the father, goes, oh yeah, there's little David. He's out in the field taking care of the sheep. But I don't think he's king material. This is the dad talking about his son. The dad brings his other sons that he believed could be the king. But he left his other son out in the pasture. David comes out and he goes, okay, this is the one. This is the one who's going to be the next king of Israel. And he anoints him king. And he later became the king. The story of these two kings are just one of these just little stories from the Bible. And from their story, you learn a few things. With Saul, it was like a popularity contest. He looked good, but he didn't have the qualities of a leader that people want to follow. He didn't have a moral compass to guide him to make good decisions. So when David showed up, he was just threatened by him. But David, the overlooked one, overlooked by his dad, overlooked by his brothers, overlooked by everyone in his life, but underestimated by everyone in his life. Just from this little story, we learn that you can't build your life on outward appearances. Who cares if you look good? Can you do good things? What can you do with your life? You can't build your life on good looks. Thank God, because they fade away, don't they? Start losing your hair like me, and you start getting a belly, and you start getting aches and pains all over the place. I remember all the older folks saying, oh yeah, Dave, you'll see when you get older. I'm like, I get it. And so, but think of these things that you can learn. Character qualities that all great leaders have. Strong work ethic, humility, honesty, integrity, personal responsibility, self-discipline. The Bible is filled with stories that we can teach our children and unpackage these things from the stories of the Bible. From David and Saul, we also learn that jealousy is going to be your downfall. We also learn that inward character is the key to building a good life. We also learned that courage begins with the ability to rule your fears. Courage begins with the ability to rule your fears. Your feelings. Fear is a feeling. You cannot be ruled by your feelings. We need to teach our children not to be ruled by their feelings. We need to teach our children that feelings are part of your life, but they're not the most important thing in your life. Feelings are indicators. Feelings are like a temperature gauge. It's telling you, it's God's way of telling you, like, okay, there's something going on in my life that I need to pay attention to. But it's not God's way of telling you there's something in your life that you need to be ruled by. When you're afraid, that's not God telling you, run. That's God telling you, well up courage. Face your fears. Go out and conquer what's in front of you. And so you have to rule your feelings and then use your head and use your strength and use your abilities and go do it. We need to teach our children these things, because I guarantee you, the schools are not teaching them these things. They're not learning it from school. So if they're not learning it from school, you're their best place to learn it. It's from you. Parents, grandchildren, adults who care. So I want to give you a few things about in Marcia and I, in our parenting, some things that we've implemented in our parenting that has helped us to bring out the best in our children. And my children were all volunteers in the VBS with all the kids this week. My oldest son, David, was one of the group leaders. Jillian and Connor were both assistants on the teams and served in many ways. Connor's out back grilling the food so we can eat right now. Connor's my youngest son, and he's 16, a 10th grader. And when you look at your children, I want to say this. I want to start by this, that there are components that make up your parenting. I'll say it like this. There are components that make up your parenting. So you have your actual parenting, and you guys don't tune me out if you're not a parent yet. Don't tune me out, because you will be a parent, and there's people in your life who need this. But there are components in your parenting that make up what you do. So I think of there's your family. Then there's the school, then there's your church, there's sports, there's the activities that you involve your children in. And so all of those things should be done on purpose. You shouldn't have your children involved in anything that's on accident. And when you have when your kids are involved in things that are by accident, maybe by accident they learn something good, more likely not. Everything in your children's life, especially when they're young, should be on purpose. And so I think of the school as a resource that serves me in my parenting. And to the extent that the school can serve my parenting, I allow the school to be part of my children's life. If that school is not good for my children, then my children need to be in a different school. Or if that teacher's not good for my child, then my kids need to have a different teacher. That kind of thing. And so you need to be involved with your parents' life, in your kid's life, but don't take it for granted. Well, that's just how the school is, and I can't, change anything. No, you need to change things for your kids. You need to get involved for your kids. And so to the extent that the school serves your parenting well, it's a good school. If it's not a situation that serves your parenting well, it's not a good situation for your family, and you need to make a change. Church is also a resource to serve you in your parenting, being part of a spiritual community. Sports. When I realized this, I was not an athlete, and I never played sports growing up. In school, Marcia was more of an athlete than I, and more involved in school than I. I was sitting on the sidelines, not involved in school, wasn't involved in any clubs, any athletics, nothing. But when I realized the power of sports, my oldest son, David, who's now 25, he was 8 years old, and Marcia and I had a conversation. I have a conversation, and I go, babe, we got to get our kids involved in sports because I think this will serve our parenting well. And so we got David on a baseball team, and began using sports to bring out the best in our son David. And from the moment he got a taste of sports and some success in sports, man, that kid became an athlete for the rest of his life. And he loves sports. He was involved in sports all the way from elementary school all the way through middle school and high school, and he did well. In high school, he was the quarterback of his football team. They don't put you at the quarterback unless you're a leader. You don't get to be the quarterback unless you can lead. You can't lead unless you have some character. You have something behind you that drives what you're doing. And so you don't always have to be a leader, but man, be a contributor, be involved. And so everything in life that you have your kids be involved in, even VBS this week, to the extent that VBS serves you well in your parenting, then VBS this week was good. And we want to give you a glimpse. Our VBS week is an opportunity for us to meet new parents in the community and say, you know what, we're here for you. We want the best for you. We want to get involved in your family's life. We are a faith community here in West Anaheim that exists to help families be better, stronger, more faithful, and successful in our community. And I want to say that another component is the table. The table is an important component of parenting. And so use the table in your house to gather around the table. Make space. Don't let yourself go, we're too busy to get together for dinner around the table. Maybe you can't do it every night, but maybe you can do it once a week. Make space around the table, and around the table have conversations that matter. Talk about things that matter around the table. Don't ever let busyness be an excuse to have conversations with your kids, to gather around the table. I would say also that raising your kids as part of a community of people who hold similar beliefs is important. You need that. Because not everybody in the world believes what you believe or sees the world through the lens that you see it. And so when you find a community that thinks like you think, when you find that community, you be part of that community because it's going to encourage you to be strong. It's going to encourage you to keep going. It's going to encourage you to bring out the best both in yourself and for your children. And that's what a church at its best is about. And that's what victory at its best is about. And I also want to say that for those of you who are not part of a church community, victory is here for you. We invite you to be part of this church community because we're here for our community. And we want to help parents succeed in this community. I'd also say that you need to expose your child to the best and worst of life. You need to expose your children to the best and the worst of life. They need to be able to see the consequences of bad choices. Don't seclude them from it. You don't necessarily need to live in it, but you need to be able to take them to it and point. Look at that. See what happens when you go down that kind of a path? See what happens, what can happen if you make bad choices? You're not judging someone, you're just going, look, kids, I don't want you to wind up like that. And one of the times that I did this with all of my kids when we used to live in San Francisco, but I took them to a part of San Francisco where 16th Street and South Van Ness. If you go to the corner of 16th Street and South Van Ness in the Mission District of San Francisco, then you will see a drug-ridden neighborhood with needles all over. You'll see a lot of bad stuff. You'll see open prostitution. You'll see a lot of bad choices. And I go, like, I wouldn't send my kids to 16th and South Van Ness, but you know what? There's plenty of kids who get around in San Francisco on public transit, and they're coming up there, and they go through there, and it's a normal part of life. But I took my kids to 16th and South Van Ness and go, come on, kids, we're going for a walk. And then just walk up a block, back, down a block. And then go, let's go to this Burger King. Let's sit down. Tell me what you saw. Tell me what you saw. And then talk about it. And then on the back end, took another walk around. And we talk about it. And you go like, look, there's broken people here. And broken people make bad choices. And broken people do harm to others to get what they want. And they're desperate. And you see a lot of that here. Our children need to be exposed to the worst. They're no better. They're going to see it someday. So let them see it by your leadership. Because can I give you this, the most powerful secret to bringing out the best in children? Mom and dad are the absolute best teachers for their children. Mom and dad are the best teachers for their children. So Take them on guided tours where they see things. But I also, on the flip side of things, I love involving my kids and having them sit at the table at my work. I love getting my kids to be able to see when I meet with leaders so they can see high caliber people and go, okay, that's how decisions are made. That's how it's done. I love for my kids to get to peek into my work to see what I do so that they can see how life at its best is from my perspective, or the best I can do, what that looks like. And so I love to bring my kids around the table of decision makers as well and expose them to influencers, good people who they can learn from, people who can be guidance to them. When our oldest son became an adult, we did this thing where we had a manhood ceremony, and we welcomed him to manhood, because one of the things I see in our culture is that there's confusion on what it means to be a man. Our culture is confused on what it means to be a man. And if you're confused about what it means to be a man or a woman, then you don't know how to live. You're going to fumble around, flounder around, and you're going to fail because you don't even know who you are. And so we had a manhood ceremony for our David. And I invited to the table men who had been part of our church and part of his life, who were people who I looked at. These are examples of good men. And I bought a sword for David, and it's a big sword, and I bought him this sword, and that was a gift that I gave to him as a symbol of David. This sword represents that you are a warrior in life. You will do battle in many realms throughout your life. And all these men surrounded him, and all these men signed a document affirming his manhood, that we welcome you to being a man. We welcome you. We're going to treat you not as a little boy anymore. We're going to treat you like a man because you are a man from this day forward. Welcome to being a man, son. And that was an important day for him becoming a man who takes responsibility. We all called on him. And these were again, he was surrounded by pastors and influencers and GMs and executives and a superintendent of a school board was one of those men. All these men who were influencers in his life. And they affirmed him as a young man. And they all agreed, David, young David, if there's anything that you need in your life, you call on us and we will help you. If there's any guidance you need, call on us and we will get behind you. And so these steps that I want to say that these are all ways that you can bring out the best in your children. And one of the things that there's a verse, I'm going to close out with this verse, and it's from 1 Timothy 4:12 in the New Testament. And it says this: let no one despise you for your youth, but set for the believers an example in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. The Apostle Paul wrote this to young people. And these 5 elements, being an example in speech, conduct, love, faith, and purity, I've looked to those 5 things as I want to bring out the best in my children in those 5 areas. That when they speak, the words that flow from their mouth are good words. Because there are times when I've seen my kids, and there's times when I know me when I was a little kid, when I spoke words that were not a good example in speech. And then I made a decision to change my speech. And then I made a decision to not ever let words come out of my mouth that drag other people down, but only words that lift people up. And that's a decision, because I want to be an example in my speech. And then I call my kids to be an example in their speech. And you can do that. But I'll tell you, one of the biggest problems with people in their parenting today is they do this. Oh, when they get older. Oh, I can't expect that of my little kids. You can expect your little kids to speak well. If you expect them to speak well and you tell them you expect them to speak well, they will speak well, and you keep on them about it and they will speak well. And so this verse, 1 Timothy 4:12, is a call for us to instill these into our kids, to let them be examples in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. And unpackaging those is the lifetime of your parenting. Because I'm still unpackaging those with my adult children, in teaching them and guiding them through those things, and even confronting them on those things. And it's an important thing to have a plan in your parenting. And so I want to call you guys to have a plan in your parenting. And we're going to close out with if you look on the sermon notes page, pull that out. There's some next steps you could take in response to this message. And you can mark it down. There's 2 places for you to mark it down. One is on the sermon notes page, and the other is on the little response form. And in our church, we do this where we go, when we these lessons that we talk about, let's take some next steps. And so pull out that little response form and pull out that sermon notes page. The sermon notes page is for you to keep, and the response form is for you to turn in. You'll be able to turn that in a moment when the ushers come to receive our offering. And ushers, if you want to go ahead and come, we're going to get ready in just a moment, but I'm going to walk you through these next steps. First, and think about yourself, which of these steps. You may want to take 1 or 2 of these steps. First, I will invest myself into teaching the next generation. That may be as a parent, that may be as a volunteer, that may be as a grandparent, that may be as a helper, as a family member. But I will invest myself into teaching the next generation, because you have something to teach them that's important. Second, I'm committed to bringing out the best in my children. If you have children and you're committed to bringing out the best in your children, for sure take that step. And you can apply some of the things we talked about today. Third, I will adopt the 1 Timothy 4:12 verse as a parenting standard for my children, teaching my children to be an example in speech, conduct, love, faith, and purity. And then lastly, we want to invite you back. If you're not part of a church community, we invite you back next Sunday for we have Kids Quest every Sunday morning where our kids meet together and the adults meet together today, like we did today, and in this room. And we invite you back next Sunday. And in 2 weeks, we invite you back for our Watermelon Sunday. It's going to be a fun day where we enjoy summer and have a great time on Watermelon Sunday. And right now, we're going to go ahead and receive our offering. Jim, will you come and take our offering?